Incompetence is very clear. I don't think this government has anyone within it who has a very significant understanding of military matters, of military cultures, of strategy in any meaningful sense. I mean, we talk about, of course, certain elements of strategy, offensive defense, and stuff like that. But that's at a very generalized level. It's not at a level of really understanding war. So I think the first failure is quite simply a failure of competence. The second failure is also, I think, substantially a failure of responsibility, because we didn't enter into this with the seriousness it deserves.
So we're saying that the political handling of Operation Sindoor was incompetent and irresponsible.
Absolutely. I have no doubt about it. Underlying all this is this insatiable hunger for publicity. Everything that is done must be claimed, must be displayed. And that is the gravest weakness of this government. It's not as if we haven't done things across the border in the past under preceding regimes. But now everything that is done must be proclaimed and must be taken credit for at the highest levels of leadership. And that is going to be our undoing.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. 2 weeks after the 4-day conflict ended, we addressed critical questions. Who ended up with the upper hand, India or Pakistan? Has India done enough to deter the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, or should we expect more terror attacks after a pause? And how should we view India's new doctrine of deterrence? Is it an assertion of India's strength, or could it make the subcontinent inherently insecure and unstable? Those are the issues I shall discuss today with the Executive Director of the Institute of Conflict Management, as well as the South Asia Terrorism Portal, Ajai Sahni. Dr. Sahni, let me start with the question they're asking both in India and Pakistan. As you assess the situation 2 weeks after the 4-day conflict ended, who emerged with the upper hand? General Huda claims Operation Sindoor has been a resounding success for India, whilst the Pakistanis have elevated their army chief to field marshal rank out of gratitude. So who emerged with the upper hand, India or Pakistan?
I think both of us are losers at this stage. Essentially, this is not to be measured in terms of how many people we killed there or how many people were killed on this side. This is not to be measured by the military equipment or the air equipment lost, the damage inflicted. It is to be measured by the environment we have created through this single action. And that environment is going to promote a permanent instability between India and Pakistan, which is going to benefit others, but is not going to benefit either nation. So as far as the conflict itself is concerned, I think, the very fact that both sides can declare victory gives you an idea of the nature of this conflict. It was not intended to inflict anything significant in terms of harm on either side. It was intended essentially for domestic audiences. And each domestic audience is captive to its own country's captive media. So we don't really, the very question of victory is meaningless because the parameters of victory were not defined in military terms or in strategic terms, but were defined essentially in terms of domestic perceptions.
I hear what you say about the environment we've created, and I'll come to that in a moment's time. But let's first talk briefly about what we claim we've achieved and whether you agree with that. The Indian Home Minister has claimed that we've killed at least 100 terrorists. I noticed that CNN News 18 on Saturday was claiming the number is as high as 170. As Executive Director of the South Asia Terrorism Portal, Are you in any position to verify and confirm any of that? And secondly, how much damage do you believe we would have inflicted on the LET and Jesh by bombing Muridke and Bahawalpur?
I cannot confirm any figures in this because these are things that are there are too many contradictory. We are an open source monitoring agency. We have no privileged access to intelligence or information of other natures. And where the numbers are disputed by the conflicting parties, it becomes very difficult for us. We have to wait a fairly long time before a consensual number emerges. That consensual number may not be correct. So you must understand that there are limitations to any open source data gathering effort. Has it done any lasting damage to these groups? The answer is absolutely not. No quantum of physical damage, of material damage, would be sufficient to actually act as a deterrent for these groupings. Muridke and Bahawalpur will be the headquarters at Muridke and Bahawalpur are likely going to be rebuilt, probably with significant government allocations, but also by a massive amount of monies that these groups are able to generate from public donations, foreign donors. There is no problem maintaining the levels of investment in these enterprises of terrorism at the level at which they currently are, or even at a slightly enhanced level. So there's no problem. The loss of life is meaningless. You have not hit any truly high-value target. Yes, you've managed to get a couple of middle-level leaders. The brother and brother-in-law of Masood Azhar are among them. But this is not in any sense a crippling blow. And as far as lower cadres are concerned, they are eternally replaceable.
You're saying 3 or 4 very important things, and I'll repeat them so that I can make sure I've understood them correctly and the audience has as well. To begin with, we have no confirmed idea of the number of terrorists killed. The claim made by the Home Minister that we've killed 100 is just that. It's a claim. We have no confirmation of it as yet. Secondly, these are low-level or medium-level people. They're not the highest and most important. Thirdly, even though we've seen fairly dramatic footage of the damage done in Muridke and Bahawalpur, you believe that these can be rebuilt fairly easily, probably with government funds or with public funds that they can generate. In other words, you don't believe lasting damage has been done to either the LET or the Jaish-e-Mohammed.
Absolutely. I don't think any lasting damage has been done. If anything, we have initiated a process of adaptation. While I say that Muridke and Bahawalpur will be rebuilt, and this has already been announced, I do not think that they will re-emerge as visible centers of terrorism. The terrorist groups will realize that while this time they were hit with ample warning, as a result, most of the areas had already been cleaned of cadre. The next time there could be a surprise attack, an unannounced attack. If that happens, they could lose people. So what they are going to probably build is both these groups maintain very large front organizations and public service organizations and madrasas and other various charitable operations, so-called charitable operations and religious activities. And those overground activities will be centered in these areas. The terrorists themselves and the leadership particularly will be driven very much deeper underground. So the next time you're looking for targets, you may find them a little harder to find.
That's very interesting. It may be more difficult for us next time around to locate the actual terror targets than it was this time.
Yes.
Now, we've also seen satellite images of the damage done to Pakistani air bases in places like Chaklala, Rahim Yar Khan, and Sargodha. The Indian Express, quite separately, has claimed that 20% of Pakistan's Air Force infrastructure has been destroyed. So let me ask you, first of all, how serious is the damage done to the Pakistani Air Force bases? Is there any way of knowing for certain? And secondly, has 20% of Pakistan's Air Force infrastructure been destroyed, as the Express has claimed, or is that a bit exaggerated?
Well, the very expression "a bit exaggerated" is a bit exaggerated. I mean, it's a ludicrous claim. Mostly what we have seen is not the destruction of core assets. There may have been a couple of strikes where they have, in fact, managed to hit their air defense systems. But by and large, what we've seen is runways having been blown up and things like that. Though those things are not of any great cost. Yes, the fact that we were able to, shall we say, hit more of their critical air assets as compared to the second cycle of their retaliation against us tends to sort of confirm that we probably dominated the escalation cycle after the first confrontation on the 6th, 7th night. So even if we have done more damage to them, and this will be something that will have to be debated in very strong technical terms, of which I am not really capable of doing. I don't think it really matters, because the scale of damage is not what matters over here. The scale of damage is not sufficient to be decisive in the future policies or strategies of either side. What will be studied is the tactical dominance, the technological balance between the two countries, the patterns of response by the two countries, and there will be again a process of adjustment, a process also of weapons acquisition to deal with the strengths of the adversary and our own weaknesses on both sides. But that's what matters. Yes.
But it seems to me you're saying that the real achievement is we got through their air defenses and were able to hit their Air Force bases, but the level and nature of the damage done to those Air Force bases may not be as great as we are pretending it is.
It's certainly nothing even close to 20% of their air assets. Nothing even remotely close to their air assets. 20%.
Now, the Prime Minister has told the country that the ceasefire happened because the Pakistani DGMO rang promising to stop terror and pleading for a ceasefire. He's also said that Operation Sindoor is only paused and not concluded. How do you view both these claims, and do they suggest that the ceasefire may not hold for very long?
Well, first of all, the DGMO is in no position to make long-term commitments on Pakistan's core strategies on Jammu Kashmir. So he can make no commitment relating to the long-term trajectory of terrorism. Even if he does, these are not to be taken credibly. These decisions are the decisions of the collective military leadership of Pakistan. Of course, the now Field Marshal and Chief of Army Staff, but also the Corps commanders who meet and discuss these things. So anything the DGMO may have said in terms of strategic shift, and we have no way to validate what he said and what he did not say, but in terms of strategic shift, would be completely irrelevant to the actual trajectory of Pakistan's behavior.
Can I ask quickly, is it likely that someone of the nature of a DGMO would ring up and promise an end of terror? I mean, is it his jurisdiction to do that?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not his jurisdiction. It's not his jurisdiction. And if at all he said something to this effect, which I am afraid we have no way of verifying, if he said something, he was way beyond his pay grade. His words are meaningless.
And that underlines the fact that this is not a permanent ceasefire by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, it's not a permanent ceasefire by the very declaration the Prime Minister made. He said Operation Sindoor is only in suspension. That it is, in fact, now the new normal. That any provocation by Pakistan in terms of a terrorist action and we do not know of what scale, but any terrorist action that can be traced back to Pakistan in future will invite a Sindoor-like response, would automatically provoke, I would suggest, a Sindoor-like response, is the position the Indian leadership has now taken.
So let me then ask you at this point two questions, and I have a sense that you have already answered my first, but nonetheless, I'll ask you that first question nevertheless. The key question from the Indian point of view is, have we deterred Pakistan, or do you believe that after a pause, there will be further strikes carried out by the groups like the Lashkar and the Jaish? When you say to me that no lasting damage has been done to these groups, it clearly means that after a pause, they'll be back at work again.
You see, first of all, it doesn't matter if any damage has been done to these groups. These groups have taken enormous damage into their stride. The death of cadre, the death of leaders is not of deterrent value, unless it becomes something where the rate of attrition is faster than the rate of replacement. There are many people standing in line to join their cadres, standing in line to take over their leadership. And most importantly, this is not a Jaish-e-Mohammed Lashkar-e-Taiba enterprise. This is an enterprise that is underwritten and controlled and directed by the Pakistani military. There is no evidence whatsoever that the Pakistani military has abandoned its fundamental ideology and its strategic objectives of recovering control of what they call the core issue, what they call their jugular vein. So to believe that this episodic intervention on India's part, however effective or otherwise it may be judged to be, is going to abruptly transform Pakistan's strategic behavior. It will transform Pakistan's strategic behavior, but not in the way we want, not in terms of deterrence, but in the further acquisition of capacities to resist or retaliate to future Indian military interventions of the nature of Operation Sindoor. And also I would like to suggest is that Operation Sindoor as a new normal doesn't really tell us anything. We can't keep repeating what we did. So we would essentially be talking about Operation Sindoor being the new normal as a military retaliation to a terrorist action. But the character of that military retaliation is not defined by Operation Sindoor and would necessarily be escalatory, would have to be greater and greater on each iteration if it is to have any deterrent or deterrent pretensions. I won't even say deterrent impact.
But you're making a very important point in that answer. Far from actually deterring the strategic thinking of the Pakistan army, which is the real problem, not the Lashkar and the Jaish. They are just operatives on behalf of the army. Far from deterring the strategic thinking of the Pakistan army, you believe the Pakistan army will be adding capacity to their ability to hit us, and therefore the problem could get worse, not better.
I think so. I think they are very much in the process of acquiring far greater military capabilities from their friends, particularly China, possibly Turkey. Turkey's contributions to the last cycle of operations has not been very successful, but the Chinese weapons support, has been extremely important in the Pakistani response. And all reports indicate that China is already committed to a far more vigorous support. Pakistan is a great investment for China in this sense. First of all, they get to test all their weapons. They get to showcase all their weapon systems to the world. And already the world has taken notice. Secondly, what they are doing is, without any losses to themselves in terms of life or significant material, what they are doing is securing their strategic objectives in the South Asia region, which is to contain India through their support to Pakistan. So Pakistan will do whatever fighting is necessary, and India will suffer the consequences. And a third factor is that the demonstration of their weapon systems will bring them enormous financial returns. People are across the world now, whether or not and how successful these have been is yet to be, and why they have been successful is yet to be deciphered. But there is a clamor for the acquisition of Chinese weapon systems across the world today. The Chengdu Aviation Corporation, I believe is the name, which is the manufacturer of the J-10 planes that were employed by the Pakistanis. Their share prices have risen enormously in the wake of this operation. So China gets multiple benefits. Pakistan is happy to lose a few hundred or a few thousand of its excess population periodically. And India is effectively contained in a situation of permanent warlike preparation, which is going to be very expensive, and occasional, at least, conflagration, which is going to dampen its economic growth, which we believe is the most important element of the developmental cycles.
Please carry on. Please carry on.
And which China seeks to contain.
From what you're saying, it sounds very much as if China gains, Pakistan gains, but India is the one that's pushed into a corner and doesn't gain at all. In fact, we could suffer economic loss of growth.
Absolutely. I don't think Pakistan gains so much. Pakistan gains in a very short-term perspective. But where Pakistan is heading really is into a relationship of vassalage to China. In fact, whatever we do, Pakistan will inevitably head into vassalage as far as China is concerned, because the relationship of such closeness between two such unequal powers will always be a relationship of extreme dependence. So in the long term, I think Pakistan will be losing enormously in its choices that it is making, both in terms of its conflict with India and in terms of its growing dependence on China. But China will definitely gain. India is definitely losing. We are being seen, and will, with each iteration of this operation, or this new normal Operation Sindoor, which each iteration we will be seen as a more unreliable and unstable and uncertain power. Nobody is going to bring in large quantities of FDI. Nobody is going to shift manufacturing to a country that is forever on the edge of near war or war itself.
In which case, let me ask you this. India has said that it will view every act of terror as a declaration of war. You already explained to me this is not going to deter the elite in Jesh. It's certainly not going to make Pakistan change or forsake its strategic thinking. So will this particular posture by India only make the subcontinent inherently insecure and unstable, whilst adversely affecting FDI flows into our country and adversely affecting how the world looks upon India as an economic opportunity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have created, through our rhetoric and our postures, a situation that makes India look, shall we say, like a very excitable and unreliable partner. A partner, as I said, forever on the edge of near war or operations other than war, military operations other than war, which nobody wants to be party to. No country seeking investment, growth, no corporation seeking investment and growth would like to come to a country which is forever on the edge of war, which we have declared ourselves to be.
In which case, let me put you the three key elements of Mr. Modi's new Doctrine of Deterrence, which he announced on Monday the 12th, exactly 2 weeks ago. I want to ask you what you think of those three key elements as Executive Director of the Institute of Conflict Management. The first element is that India will respond decisively to any act of terror. The second is it will not submit to nuclear blackmail. And the third is it will not distinguish between terrorists and governments that sponsor or shield them. How do you, as Executive Director of the Institute for Conflict Management, view this new Doctrine of Deterrence?
There are no doctrines of deterrence. Deterrence is a strategy or an action, and strategies and actions have to be backed by capacities and capabilities. Our problem is we see this as a discrete issue of response to particular incidents. 2016 we responded, 2019 we responded, 2025 we responded. Each time the response is escalated. How will it have deterrent value unless we are fully committed, both in terms of the acquisition of capacities and the scale and character of response? Take Sindoor. Were we fully committed to the response? Were we fully committed to avenging the Baisaran Maidan massacre? If we were, why would we inform Pakistan before the operation of what we were going to do? You know, Karan, if you or I or any citizen of India leaked such information in a situation of war to the enemy, we would be shot out of hand for spying. Even in a situation of operations other than war, as Sindoor was, we would be guilty of the highest possible form of treason and would earn ourselves very long terms in jail. And yet, we officially communicate this information. What does this information do? It puts the adversary on the highest levels of alert. It ties our own forces down. It ties their hands behind their back. We were told that the armed forces have been given a free hand. What is a free hand when you tell them they can't touch military targets? What was the impact on the reaction time?
Can I at that point interrupt and point this out? Officially, the Indian Foreign Ministry has actually issued a statement that, in fact, Mr. Jaishankar has been deliberately misunderstood by Rahul Gandhi. The ministry says that, in fact, India did not inform Pakistan of Operation Sindoor before the attacks, but immediately after the attacks, that our intention was only to hit terrorist targets and there was no need for them to retaliate. Of course, as the foreign minister added, they didn't take what he called good advice.
But have you seen the foreign minister's statement?
It's
you can deny it as much as you like. I have not invented it. I haven't actually seen Rajiv Gandhi's response to this. I don't pay too much attention to what Rahul Gandhi says. I've seen the statement by the External Affairs Minister, and he says it very clearly. Before the operation started, we told Pakistan. How can you tell Pakistan what you're going to do? How can you do that? Do you know the risks you are imposing on your own fighting men? Of which costs have most likely been paid. We do not admit them. But you will remember Air Vice Marshal Bharti's statement that this is a combat scenario. In a combat scenario, there will be losses. So some losses have been suffered by the Air Force. What those are, I am in no position to define.
And you believe that those losses are perhaps directly related to the fact that allegedly we informed the Pakistanis before we undertook Operation Sindoor what we were proposing to do?
Both that we informed the Pakistanis and the consequences of the limitations placed, operational limitations placed on the Air Force and the responding forces.
The limitations being don't strike military targets.
Absolutely. So if you tell me that I cannot strike military targets, but I must go deep into the adversary's territory and strike targets there, I don't have to cross the border. They didn't cross the border or the LOC. But we are hitting them 100 kilometers into their territory. Why will they not hit us a few kilometers into ours? And please understand, one thing that is, not even begun to be understood is the sheer enormity of what has been done here by the Indian state. We are talking about weapon systems that travel at speeds of Mach 3, Mach 5. the reaction time available after the weapon leaves its source is a second or a second and a half, 2 seconds, when we are talking about distances of 100 kilometers or more. A second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And you've already told me that I cannot disable the systems that are going to release this reaction. You are already telling the adversary that I am going to be sitting there. So he is fully prepared. I have not even that necessary moment of surprise. I cannot begin to comprehend the enormity of what has been done.
Then let me ask you this question. By putting fetters on our military, by saying you cannot strike military targets, you can only strike terrorist targets, and by forewarning the Pakistanis in advance, as allegedly it seems the foreign minister claimed, is this an example of incompetence of our politicians or irresponsibility? Because clearly it's not a sensible way of handling matters. So which is it, incompetence or irresponsibility or both?
I would suspect both. Incompetence is very clear. I don't think this government has anyone within it who has a very significant understanding of military matters, of military cultures, of strategy in any meaningful sense. I mean, we talk about, of course, certain elements of strategy, offensive defense, and stuff like that. But that's at a very generalized level. It's not at a level of really understanding war. So I think the first failure is quite simply a failure of competence. The second failure is also, I think, substantially a failure of responsibility, because we didn't enter into this with the seriousness it deserves. I mean, I get the sense that this was some sort of thing they thought that they'd do a T20 match fixing kind of a thing. I'll tell Pakistan, and then Pakistan will come and hit some insignificant target on my side. They can go home happy and we can go. You are not beginning to recognize, even in such a situation, that you are going 100 kilometers into the adversary's territory with lethal intent. You are meaning to kill and have killed and are claiming to have killed 100 people. You are doing this to inflict vengeance for that terrible slaughter at Baisaran Maidan. And yet, this is your orientation? Oh, that we told Pakistan that, look, we're not going to do anything to your military targets, and underlying presumption being that you can also hit us back and not hit our military targets. Who thought this through? Who thought this through?
So we're saying that the political handling of Operation Sindoor was incompetent and irresponsible.
Absolutely. I have no doubt of that.
But the Prime Minister has actually claimed that after 4 days, the Pakistani DGMO rang up pleading for a ceasefire. He's also claimed that he delivered a promise that there would be no further military action and, more importantly, no terrorist action against India. If the Prime Minister is correct, and I'm using that word deliberately, if the Prime Minister is correct, doesn't it suggest we scored heavily?
Well, if the Prime Minister is correct, absolutely we have scored heavily. But on the other hand, what we see in Pakistan is a complete restoration of the, shall we say, status and authority of the army. We have seen the promotion of the Chief of Army Staff to the rank of Field Marshal, which is a very, very rare thing to do. So evidently, the leadership in Pakistan is telling its people that it has scored a far greater victory against India than any, weeping and begging by the DGMO, Pakistan DGMO might have achieved for us. I mean, look at the comparative responses on both sides. I haven't seen the Air Vice Marshal or the Air Marshal being promoted to Air Chief
Marshal of the Air Force.
Marshal of the Air Force. I mean, in India, I haven't seen any.
How significant is the promotion General Munir got, and how significant is the belief that the standing and popularity of both the Pakistan Army and the Pakistani Army Chief have been hugely strengthened in public eyes in Pakistan. How significant are both?
I think they're very significant, but they are not of permanent significance. You see, Pakistan's internal difficulties, the conduct, the behavior of the army, the progressive challenge of military authority by insurgent and terrorist groupings, all these will eventually reassert themselves. So the army in a year or so will be back to where it was. The political opposition to the army is very real. The offenses against the PTI and especially against Imran Khan, including his alleged rape in prison by an army officer, all these are things that are going to reassert themselves, but temporarily. From a situation of an acute crisis of confidence in the Pakistan army, we have now come to a situation of a, shall we say, overflow of public support to that same army in days. A complete transformation. You've created military heroes, you've created heroes in the Air Force. And this was one of the, I think, unfortunate, unintended consequences, where we should be working towards weakening the state, weakening the army, and weakening Pakistan as a economy. We continue to do things to strengthen them.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Let me ask you at this point about the second tactic that India has deployed against Pakistan, the putting in abeyance of the Indus Waters Treaty. That continues despite the ceasefire. Now, India certainly is in no position to divert or stop the flow of water. We don't have the infrastructure to do so, and it'll take us years, if not a decade and more, to create it. But what India can do is to deny Pakistan hydrological data, and it can certainly interfere with what's called the predictability of the flow of water. And the Indian Express has already on its front page said a couple of days ago that India plans to flush the Salal and Baglihar dams on the Chenab every month. That could become critical during the forthcoming monsoons and certainly during the Kharif sowing season. If all of that happens, how do you think Pakistan will respond? Because the Indus waters amount to 80% of Pakistani agriculture, and I'm told if you add the electricity component, it's pretty close to 25% of Pakistan's GDP. So how will Pakistan respond to this far more serious threat?
I think, first of all, we must understand that the immediate threat, while real, is limited. Number two, I think this is one of the most productive elements in terms of the Indian interest of policy or strategy that India has announced. You said that even if we are to divert water flows and all, this is going to take years. And this is a point that I must constantly emphasize. We seem to forget we've had Pakistani-sponsored terrorism in Jammu Kashmir for 35 years. Another 15 years in Punjab. We've had Pakistani mischief in India for all its existence, 78 years now. We've got to start thinking of this in terms of the years and the decades if we are to solve it. We can't keep on saying, oh, they did this, so we'll beat them up for a day and then go back to normal. This has to be a long-term strategy. And I think this is a very important element of that long-term strategy. Now, the question is, how do we execute this strategy? Now, the one thing this government doesn't seem to understand or realize is that these must be covert operations, overwhelmingly. The enemy will know what we are doing. But if you announce it in the Indian Express every other day, you first of all give the adversary instrumentalities to seek foreign intervention, to seek international judicial entities to intervene, to seek UN intervention. The damage you will be doing will be significant but marginal. They will manage it. They will not be under any extraordinary pressure to retaliate unless you keep on tom-tomming this. And that is what is the danger. We must rely more and more and more on covert operation and deniable operations if we are to do serious and sustained harm to the Pakistani system. Otherwise, we will push everything towards internationalization. And that is the last thing we should be looking for.
Once again, by informing the Indian Express, and quite clearly someone in officialdom did inform the Indian Express that we will be flushing the Baglihar and the Salal dams once every month, we are behaving irresponsibly and incompetently because we are forewarning the Pakistanis we intend to do this and giving them an opportunity to be ready and prepared for it. This is a bit like the allegation that Mr. Jaishankar informed the Pakistanis in advance of Operation Sindoor. This is another example of incompetence and irresponsibility.
You see, underlying all this is this insatiable hunger for publicity. Everything that is done must be claimed, must be displayed. And that is the gravest weakness of this government. It's not as if we haven't done things across the border in the past under preceding regimes. But now everything that is done must be proclaimed and must be taken credit for at the highest levels of leadership. And that is going to be our undoing. Because the consequences, I mean, as we talked about the stabilization of the Pakistani's military's position in Pakistan, and the abrupt stabilization that consequently follows in Pakistan itself. All of Pakistan today is in this state of warlike mobilization, where they are willing to accept everything the government is doing. Not what we want. We don't want the people of Pakistan to be satisfied with their government or happy with their government. But we have produced precisely that effect. So as long as we carry on engaging in operations and actions in the open, we will attract more and more unwanted consequences. And that is what is, yeah.
So even if this is not incompetence and irresponsibility, although it comes very close to it in this instance, it's unthinking, it's not what we need to do. It's in fact the opposite of what we should be doing.
Yes, I believe our best options are covert. And alongside, the most important thing we must do is to build our military capacities. You know, I mean, it is astonishing to me that we are very happy that our armies or our military forces are twice the size of the Pakistani military forces and in various components. We will not go into the technological equation between what they have and what we have, but sure, numerically, we are twice what they are. Why should we be twice what they are? We have a population 5 times their population. We have a GDP 10 times their population, almost 11 times their GDP. We have territory which is 8 times their territory. Why should we have an army, military force that is only twice that of Pakistan? And Pakistan is not our only problem. Our main adversary is the giant on the other side, China. If we were prepared for China, which we are completely unprepared for, we would not have to be worried about Pakistan. This whole idea that we need to have defensive parity with Pakistan is ludicrous, and it has persisted since the creation of these two countries. We have sought nothing more than defensive parity with China, with Pakistan. And we are ostriches. We bury our head in the sand as far as China is concerned.
And it should be exactly the other way around.
It should be the other way around. I'm not saying we should be going to war with China. But a weak country, there's this wonderful line which says that if you don't have a strategy, you will be part of somebody else's strategy. And that's what we are all the time. Because we are weak, because we have no clear strategic perspective, because we have not aligned our strengths with a coherent strategic perspective, with a coherent understanding of the risks and threats in the region. We are constantly the object of other people's mischief and strategies.
In other words, once again, it is failure on our part, politically, strategically, to clearly think through the problems we face and devise appropriate solutions for them that places us in what looks like a mess.
Absolutely, absolutely.
In other words, we have only ourselves to blame.
We always have only ourselves to blame. Pakistan has only itself to blame for whatever condition it's in. This whole idea that some white man is going to come on a horse and rescue us is part of our problem.
One last question. 2 or 3 times in this interview, you've mentioned that we ought to be doing things more covertly. Are you suggesting Israeli-style, Mossad-style operations that effectively take out our opponents on the other side, which we can then deny because we're not directly linked to?
Well, Israel's been doing that for a long time. Is Israel more secure today?
So then what are you suggesting?
There is a vast array of covert instrumentalities available to us. We can't go into details because, well, that's part of talking about stuff that we shouldn't be talking. The essence of covert operations is that they are covert. But I can tell you that in broad terms, they include every possibility of intervention, economic, political, to exploit the weaknesses of the adversary, to undermine the strengths of the adversary. How do you do that? You do that by studying the adversary, seeing where his political vulnerabilities are, and interceding in ways that will increase his political vulnerabilities. It's a corrupt nation. All nations are corrupt. Leaderships can be corrupted. They can be bought over. There is an information war to fight. We are screaming constantly 24 hours a day on television. But none of this actually is addressed to the Pakistanis. Information war is not against the people of Pakistan. It is an Indian information war directed to or against whatever way you would like to interpret it, the people of India.
But once again, you're saying something very important, Dr. Sahni. There are a whole multitude of covert options available to us. You've described what they are without going into, understandably, the details of them. What's missing on our part is the cold, careful, calculated, strategic thinking that will lead us to say, these are the better ways of undermining Pakistan. We are not doing that.
We are not doing that.
That thinking isn't happening.
The thinking is the first stage. After that, you have to create the mandate. The mandate has to be given to particular agencies. Those agencies have to be fully resourced. They must understand that mandate and be fully resourced to fulfill that mandate. This chain is a long chain. It will take time. But the first step is not being taken. The first step of thinking and designing that mandate has never been taken. And this is something, I know of repeated papers given to governments, not just this government, preceding governments also, by KPS Gill, outlining precisely this strategy.
And they were ignored.
They disappear into whatever the government, and these were given or sent to people at the highest level. And this goes back to the 90s, the end 1990s.
So
this
once
strategy
again,
has been spelt out.
Once again, it is the inability of politicians, or maybe I should go stronger and say the failure of politicians, that is responsible for the fact that we're floundering when it comes to the question, how do we deal with Pakistan?
It is completely their failure. And it is a failure that is, in a sense, now being built into the very nature of politics in this country. We are perpetually in election mode. We are constantly looking towards the next election. Consequently, and we have an election ongoing every time. It's a state election, it's a local election. Even if they are local elections, the leadership at the highest level becomes involved in that. So we are only talking about electoral management, of the capture of power. We have no strategic orientation towards the risks, the military risks and the security risks around us. And that is why you don't see any kind of a sustained change, except for stuff you can show. Oh, we bought 36 Rafales. Look at how good it is. I'll go and break a coconut on it. But that's it. We don't see a sustained orientation towards the fundamentals of defense and security, both in external defense and internal security in this country.
Dr. Sahni, thank you very much for this comprehensive interview and your sharp, telling, piercing, I should say, critique of the way our politicians have handled the crisis with Pakistan virtually from independence onwards. And thank you for pointing out so strongly that you believe the political handling of Operation Sindoor was both incompetent and irresponsible. Take care, stay safe.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.